remove this. I think it is not. Good afternoon. We had a wonderful discussion over last 2 days. We are a little behind schedule by about 8 minutes or so, but I'm confident that we would end at 4:30. So I extend a very warm welcome to my Lord Honorable Justice Pinaki Chandra Ghose, who was my Chief Justice here and is presently sitting Judge of the Supreme Court of India. I also welcome our Chancellor, Honorable Mr. Justice Ramesh Ranganathan, who was there for the inaugural and again found time on a Sunday afternoon for us. Sir, we are grateful to you. We have Cole Durham, who will be presenting the summary of the deliberations we had in our business sessions. And we are delighted to have Katherine Marshall, Senior Fellow, Berkley Center for Religion, Peace and World Affairs, Georgetown University, and Executive Director of World Faiths Development Dialogue, United States. So, and I extend warm welcome to all the delegates. You know, we had sessions extending to 8 o'clock yesterday night, and we finished around 10 o'clock day before. So I know all of you are tired. Some of the delegates have left, but there is more to come. So please welcome Katherine Marshall for her valedictory address.
Well, thank you for that warm welcome and for the honor that you've done to invite me to speak at this important concluding session. I have to thank all the organizers. It's been a reminder to me of the unique features of India and of its intellectual fora, full of ideas and experience, but I was also reminded of Amartya Sen's wonderful book, The Argumentative Indian. And I also have to thank Cole Durham, who has a sort of traveling seminar with a group of people who meet in different corners of the world and share experience and sharpen our ideas one against the other. I'm going to speak, I hope, quite briefly and return to the conference title, which is Peace, Stability, and Sustainable Development, the Role of Religion, reflecting primarily at the global level. I unfortunately missed a part of the conference. I was involved in a faculty retreat, and I've not had the privilege of working as much on India as I would like, so most of my comments are at a much more global level. And finally, I have 5 topics that, as I listened to people speaking, came very much into mind, and my own questions about these topics were sharpened. So the first set of comments relate to the Sustainable Development Goals. As I'm sure everyone knows, on January the 1st, 2016, these goals, which were approved by the General Assembly, actually came into effect. And so we're now 1 year in to a journey that will take us to the year 2030. The SDGs are not exactly a household word any more than the Millennium Development Goals, their predecessors were. But they represent a very important global architecture. I think it's an ethical architecture, it's a statistical architecture, but it's also an architecture of commitment and of covenant, to use a word that has a religious connotation. Looking back to the Millennium Development Goals, where did they come from? They came from a lot of concerns during the 1990s that conference after conference had come up with wonderful commitments which were enshrined in paper, and everyone went away and forgot them. And so the idea was to take some of the best understandings, frankly coming from business, but from some other sectors as well, that I would call management wisdom, that you have to have specific targets, they have to be quantified, you have to have responsibilities and accountability structures, monitoring, and so forth. So that was the sort of structure behind the Millennium Development Goals. And when 2013 roughly came around, people started saying, what comes next? We don't have the turn of the millennium, but we need to have some kind of a continuing structure, starting when the deadline for the MDGs rolled around, which was in 2015. And so there was, in fact, what is described as the largest consultation process that has taken place in the world. They say 2 million people were actually consulted in one way or another in formulating what are now known as the Sustainable Development Goals. And some features of those, I think, are significant. First, the word sustainable, which is part of the title here, generally means climate change and environment. Of course, it also means lasting, but it's code in many ways for a broadening of development goals to encompass the environment. But the goals were also formulated at a time when a term that's very popular is CVE, which is countering violent extremism, had come to dominate a lot of discussions within the United Nations system. And another important element of these Sustainable Development Goals is that they are to encompass all countries. So that means Japan and the United States, as well as Laos, Bangladesh, and Bolivia. So the Sustainable Development Goals are currently our architecture. And one of the issues that's part of it, which I think echoes the theme of this conference, is a much greater emphasis than there was in the past on governance issues and on rule of law. And an effort to try to include essentially virtually every issue. So the Sustainable Development Goals are problematic in one sense that there are 17 goals and 169 targets, and I don't even know how many indicators they're still churning out as to how all this will be measured. But it's interesting that people have tried to summarize it in 5 Ps. And the Ps are prosperity, people, planet, peace, and partnership. So you can see from that effort to make it simple and make it comprehensible, the degree to which it covers areas that were previously much less part of the understanding of development goals. In other words, the security, governance issues, environmental protection, etc. And in that sense, it does involve different communities, which have been quite divorced. I mean, I worked for many years at the World Bank, where we had very little involvement with the humanitarian community, knew almost nothing about them, very little engagement with security, and the peace building, which was emerging as a field, view themselves still, I think, as quite separate and in another domain from economic development. So what this signifies is an effort to try to bring all of these together. The links to human rights are very clear, but often unstated and implicit. And as far as religion is concerned, there was no explicit effort during the preparation of the Sustainable Development Goals to engage religious communities in a systematic way, though many of them were part of the broad consultation processes. And there has been, since the formulation of the Sustainable Development Goals, a series of processes organized around United Nations executing agencies to try to define the ways in which religious communities will be involved in the execution of the Sustainable Development Goals. So, turning now to what I came away from today's discussion and reflection about this topic as a sort of five general topics. My first question is a sharpening of a question that I've had for some time, which is the division between people of faith and people not of faith a useful way of looking at the world and at communities? We talk in Christianity about separating sheep and goats, and the implication, of course, is that some are better than others. As I was taught in Africa when I was working there, that tail up is goats, tail down is sheep. But in any event, I think that the division, which is used quite commonly, fudges the complex boundaries and the complexity of religious belief, of religious institutions, of religious leadership, of religious rituals, and of the roles that it plays in communities. In the health sector, where we're doing quite a lot of work, there is an effort to try to say, is there a faith DNA? Is there some way in which religious provision of vaccination services, or for malaria, or for Zika, is in some way separable from a secular? And the basic answer is no. You could ask the same question. I think you can ask the question, how are religious ideas involved in any issue? I mean, I'm currently involved in thinking about early childhood education, and I think it raises a lot of interesting questions about where religious institutions and ideas